Town of Rome Board meeting to order for Thursday, February 3rd at 5 o'clock. I get a roll call starting from my left.
Weisinger here.
Minter here.
Isabel here.
Goldman here.
Bauerheit here.
Thank you. Number 3 is going to get a certified posting of the meeting, please.
I certify that on Monday, January 31st, 2022, the agenda for the Town of Rome Board meeting for Thursday, February 3rd was emailed to the Wisconsin Rapids Tribune at 5:47 p.m., posted at Rome Town Hall at 6:16 p.m., at Leicester Public Library of Rome at 5:51 p.m., and at Nakusa Port Edward State Bank at 6:51 p.m.
Thank you. Number 4, get a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented with one correction. Item 14 should say approval of appointment and should not say reappointment. Should just be appointment.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Number 5, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 6, citizen comments. We have a comment here, so I will read this. During the citizen comment period of the agenda, the town board welcomes comments from any town resident, not a member of the town board, on any item not on the agenda. Please know that pursuant to state law, the board cannot engage in conversation with you, but may ask questions. The board may refer the item to staff, a standing committee, or a future board agenda for discussion and action. Each person wishing to speak will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Speakers are asked to submit a card to the clerk treasurer for providing their name, address, and topic for discussion. The board will also take comment from the public on agenda items as called by the chair, but not during citizen comment. Please note that once the board begins discussion on an agenda item, no further comment will be allowed from the public on that issue. Mr. Beal?
Beal.
Yes, would you come to the podium, please? Would you
Make sure
state
the
your
red
name?
light is on.
State your name and address, please.
Name is Tom Beal. I live at 314 Wave Trail in Rome. I'm coming here on behalf of the Monroe Prairie ATV Club. I'm one of the on the board of directors. And when the county put in their new ordinance for the different roads to be able to be ATV routes, one of the items was signing roads which were not to be UTV and ATV usable. And I have not seen any no ATV signs up on Highway 13 out here. And I know we get a lot of comments to the club when people are riding up and down between Lake Sherwood and we're coming up to Pritzels for gas. And it reflects badly upon our club that these people are riding there. We were just wondering whether or not the town is actually intending on putting any kind of signs through there.
Okay, we can't get into discussions, but I think we can make a comment.
Well, it's a very timely question because we actually just met with the DOT last week, Wednesday, the 26th, and Chief Lobby had brought up that we had ordered signs and we had not received them yet. So I believe Tony, the engineer from the DOT, was supposed to be following up on where those signs were at. Because I thought the state was going to provide those signs along State Highway 13.
Correct, just to make a comment, we can't put signs on Highway 13. We've been in contact with DOT and they told us they were gonna put signs. That was already last spring and it still hasn't happened, so they were reminded, I believe, the highway department also had recontacted them over last summer requesting those get placed, so we're at their mercy of when they place them.
Okay. I just wanted to be able to take something back to our members and let them know that, you know, it's in the planning and really there's not much else we can do. But I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention that, you know, we try and enforce it with our membership and we put out the message every time we have a meeting. So if something like that were to happen, we would hope that you could, you know, take the understanding that we have tried to teach our members that they don't go there. We remind them that they shouldn't be there, as well as over on Highway Z, that there's only certain parts they can go to, and we wouldn't want that to reflect badly upon our club.
Yeah, we can't get into discussion, but I believe I can ask a question. Aren't all state state roads off limits to ATVs in the state of Wisconsin?
Unless the speed limit, I'm not sure off the top of my head if it's 35 or 25, but like.
It's
cities-
25. It's 25.
Yeah, because Arkdale has, an exception between, 16th Avenue and Cottonville Road or something right over there. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. No action contemplated except possible referral to future agenda items. Number 7, information updates, meeting recaps, recent correspondence, current events, and announcements. Jerry, would you like to start?
I have nothing.
I have nothing.
Dan?
Attended the utility committee meeting earlier this week, and if everybody recalls, the week prior at the town board meeting, we discussed in brief the potential Sherwood expansion for the water utility. The utility committee, after discussion, has decided to table that at least until next year for various reasons. So, aside from that, we also had ambulance district meeting earlier this week. First month went relatively well. Some minor things to work out procedure-wise. All the board members have a report in front of them for the first month. If there's anything that you want to see that's not in that report, please let Jamie or I know, and we'll take it back to Lifestar, make sure they get it in there. Of note is the average call received on scene time of 10 minutes and 14 seconds. That's a 13 to 15 minute savings over what we saw with Nakusa Ambulance, so that's a great thing for the community. And similarly, Monroe and Big Flats see savings too, so.
In addition to that 1014, that includes Monroe and Big Flats, and they had
Yeah.
quite a few calls as well, so
Yeah.
I think the Rome response was gonna be,
It's on the
you
lower
asked
end of
them-
that, yeah.
Yeah, you did ask them to expand on that, so give us a breakdown by town, so
Yep.
that'll be on the next one. I also asked them to give us a range of the high and low between all the calls, so let's see what happens there. Could you expand a little bit on the issue we had there with them, as far as the contract with mutual aid?
Yeah. So our contract with them requires them to have mutual aid agreements with surrounding communities. That's in place with everyone except the Adams County Ambulance District to the south of us. They had their meeting the week prior to last, that some of us attended, and everything sounded good. However, when the final kind of, we'll call it intercompany mutual aid agreement was presented to us this week, it wasn't as mutual as we had hoped it would be. So Lifestar is gonna go back to them with our suggestions, and we'll see what they come back with. So, I mean, we're trying to be friendly with our neighbors, to the south. Lifestar had pointed out that there's nothing prohibiting them from covering both territories since they're all licensed the same, but we just wanna play nice, so see what we come up with. But we think it'd be beneficial for both Adams County District and our district if they're able to just interoperate with no encumbrances, so.
Anything else? Oh, thanks. Bob?
Yes, the Parks and Rec Committee met this last Monday on the 31st of January to review the new bid package that we had sent out for the band shell. And we got bids back from several contractors, and we're looking at the lowest bid for both Phase 1 and Phase 2. And unfortunately, the bids came back $65,000 higher than they were the last time we bid that out. It's not to say that the project is not doable yet, but we're still kind of weighing our options to see what our finances are going to look like. It's very, very close to be doable right now. We've asked the architect to propose a couple changes in the drawing that wouldn't change the appearance of the building, but might make it a little bit less to construct. So we're going to see where that comes out. and give you a recommendation as soon as we can.
Jamie, do you have anything?
I do not.
Don't we have a lot of events coming up this week, next week or two?
Well, this weekend is the ski jump. So the 2 hills will be used for sanctioned jumping out at Tri-Norris. The 55 meter, the largest jump, they'll be just doing a display, but it won't be a competitive jump. It starts at noon on Saturday.
Okay, and I think next weekend is Snow Blast at Arrowhead. Is it next weekend?
Yes, next weekend is Snow Blast at Arrowhead Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay, and I had nothing, so. Discuss and possible action on the following items. Number 8, discussion and action approval of the January 20th, 2022 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve as presented.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Number 9, discussion and possible action. Ehlers, how do you pronounce that? Ehlers, okay. Ehlers Public Finance Advisors Levy Limit and Tax Base Analysis presented by Greg Johnson.
We were just discussing that several of you may not have met Greg in person. He's been with the town for a number of years and was Ehlers was a big contributor when we first entered into the TIF, and Greg still manages that TIF, so welcome back.
Good to be back. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleased to be here before you this afternoon. What I'm here to discuss is an analysis that Jamie had asked us to put together that kind of looked at the impacts of some potential growth outside of the Texas General Finance District, how that could impact the town's overall tax base and levy authority under levy limits in Wisconsin. So that's really kind of what I'm here to talk about this evening. One of the projects that Ehlers worked on with the town board a couple of years ago was the development of a 5-year financial management plan, which projected out the town's operating budget needs over a 5-year period, as well as looked at long-term capital needs as well, to kind of look at the overall projected levy and tax rate impact on the town over that multi-year period. Part of that plan included a levy limit analysis that kind of made sure that the town's levy would be in compliance with the state statutory limit requirements. So this is kind of a more in-depth look at that aspect of the town's overall financial picture. So really the objective is to, again, just kind of look at some projections for growth outside of the TID district, how that will impact your allowable levy, how that impacts the tax rate. And then second, I'm going to speak to the impact of how a TID closure impacts the tax rate under levy limits. The TID closure for Rome is still several years out. At the present time, it's projected that the TID will close in 2030. We look at that each year. So we're kind of looking at this a little far out in terms of the impact of the TID closure, but I'll speak to that in terms of the overall financial impact to the town. So some background on levy limits. Levy limits have been in place in Wisconsin since 2005. And the basic premise of levy limits is that a community can increase its levy from the prior year by a percentage equal to net new construction. And then there are other adjustments that a community can claim above that net new construction percentage. So the town, in addition to increasing levy by net new construction, is generally applied 2 other adjustments to increase the allowable levy over the years. One has been for general obligation debt service. The town has existing debt outstanding, and all debt is exempted from levy limits. So whatever the town needs to levy to make your annual debt service payments, you can increase the levy to cover that beyond the net new construction. And the other adjustment that the town has used was really just for the first time this past year for the 21 levy for the 2022 budget. The town got approval from the town electors to increase the levy by a specific dollar amount. The town was under the population threshold that allows for that exception for a levy increase approved by the town electors. But largely speaking, under a levy limit context, it's really kind of driven by that net new construction each year. And so net new construction is determined by the Department of Revenue each year for each community. And there are really two net new construction numbers that are prepared by the Department of Revenue that have some very modest differences. But I get asked often when we're talking about levy limits, well, why is there a difference between those two numbers? And so I just kind of summarize that here in the presentation. So there's a net new construction report that the DOR publishes each year. And that lists the net new construction percentage that each community has to abide by for levy limits. And that's reduced by any demolition or destruction of buildings that may have occurred the prior year. I'm going to summarize in a moment the other information that the DOR publishes where they show the change in total value for the town. And one of the benchmarks that they look at is that change in value that's due to net new construction. And that reports the total new construction and the higher utility for each class, but it does not include the removal of buildings. So the difference between these two numbers is modest. We're talking about a couple hundredths of a percent. So it's not a huge difference, but I just wanted to explain that there's a difference between those two net new construction numbers that the DOR does publish. And I'll kind of explain how this all works as we go through the presentation. And feel free to stop me as I'm going through this. I'm happy to answer questions as we go. So in terms of the valuation history, to kind of the reasons we look at this is when we're talking about, okay, how's the town's value going to increase as you see some new development and construction? We've put together kind of a forecast. And so on the top half of this spreadsheet that's on page 4, this shows the change in total equalized value within the town over the past 5 years. And this is what the DOR refers to as the TID-in equalized value, which means includes all property value within the town, including property located within the town's tax incremental finance district. And so that total equalized value change you see in the column here on the far left, so that shows how the total percentage has changed each year. And then we break that down by some subcomponents. So in terms of how much of that total percentage change is attributable to economic change within the community, the net new construction is again the new construction activity within the community, and then the other category includes corrections or adjustments and personal property. So we kind of break it down to kind of look at how that total change is arrived at in the three categories: economic change, net new construction, and other and personal property. So that's the total value within the town. But when you're looking at the town's allowable levy and your tax rate, you're really more focused on the TID out value, because really the increment value, that's going to the TID district. The town's really only collecting taxes on the value that's outside of the TIF district. So in the second half of this spreadsheet, we've done the same projection, but we do it for the TID out value. So we project how that, show how that has historically changed for the value that's not included in the TIF district. And so what we've circled here is kind of that net new construction percentage. So you can see over the past couple of years, the town's net new construction has averaged about 1.87%. So that percentage each year is really what the town can increase its allowable levy by before you factor in your debt payments. So what we were asked to do is to kind of say, okay, looking at the town's current value, if we see some new growth outside of the TIF district, how might that impact the net new construction numbers and the valuation numbers for the town overall? And so we were asked to kind of look at the Lido development, which is occurring outside of the TIF district, and try to kind of factor in how that value could change. But without the Lido development, here's kind of how that equalized value would break down over the next couple of years if we just took the current trends over the past 5 years. So we've tried to be conservative with this analysis. The economic change, we've reduced the average by about 50%. So the last 4 years, the average has been about a little over 4%. We're showing that if we forecast conservatively going forward, we'll just project that growth at 2%. And then for the net new construction, we've taken that 5-year average and projected how much of that growth could increase the value due to net new construction. So what that equates to is about a projection of about almost 4% growth per year for equalized value. So next, we want to revise these numbers to say, all right, if you have some additional value outside of the TIF district, and specifically focusing on that Lido development, how would these numbers change going forward? So what we've estimated is that 4 new homes, if they have a value of $500,000 each, would be added in valuation year 2022, 2023, and 2024. And then we have a final 5 homes with additional value of $500,000 each added in valuation year 2025. So we factored into those value projections, and so what I want to kind of concentrate on here is that net new construction percentage. So if you kind of look at what you've been averaging the last couple of years, it's been about 1.87%. If you factor in the phased-in construction of that Lido development, you can see that net new construction percentage is, you know, around 2.1% over the next couple of years. Now that net new construction percentage includes all growth activity within the town. So while, you know, when you're setting your levy for your general fund and general operating purposes in your debt service, really that's focusing on the value outside of the TIF district. But that net new construction percentage takes into account all activity. So as construction's occurring within the TID district out at Sand Valley, you don't get the immediate benefit of that taxable value, but you do get the immediate benefit of a higher net new construction percentage. So even though that value and that tax revenues going to the TIF district, the net new construction is increasing the town's overall construction percentage. That benefits really the entire town in terms of increasing that allowance. So while we're focusing on development outside of the TID district, if development occurs within the TID, that's going to drive up your net new construction percentage as well. I want to pause there just before I continue much farther, just to see if there's any initial questions.
I had a question, the 500,000 home figure, is that just a conservative estimate, or
Yes.
is that from any plans or anything that's been happening out there already?
Just a conservative estimate.
Okay. Do we have anything that?
One
would-
house plan, and I would say I would have to just double check, would be slightly more than that, but I think I think 500,000 is a good average with the 17 homes. Some might be a little more, some might be more than that, some might be that.
That include the price of the property? No.
No.
Greg, if you're adding 4 new homes of a value of 500,000 each year from 2023 and 2024, why doesn't the net new construction go up almost $2 million each year?
Because the net, it's kind of factored into the net new construction percentage, is kind of looking at the change over the prior year. So it's not necessarily that all that value necessarily falls into the net new construction percentage. It's how go back a slide, it's for a couple slides, it's probably easier to explain. So when we kind of look at that net new construction, I mean, we've added it into kind of these, you know, these particular values here. So here, while you're, you know, kind of seeing that you're gonna see that net new construction, that's where we added in the new value going forward to kind of calculate, you know, that percentage change over the prior year. So we factor in the new value in the net new construction. So here you're seeing, you know, how much of that total value is due to net new construction. You've had some significant increases from prior years, but the percentage increase, you know, is still more modest. Does that make sense?
And that includes a reduction from any demolition or destruction of building, et cetera. So
It wouldn't-
that's why they're using the percentage.
Right. So the value goes up, but I mean, it's still based on kind of that percentage difference, you know, from over, you know, in terms of the total value. So, the value goes up by that amount, but the net new construction percentage calculation doesn't necessarily take into account the fact that let me back up. It does take into account that you've added in that new value, but it doesn't automatically just go to that. The percentage breakdown kind of factors in the total value of the town, not just the net new construction. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
I would say your prior 5 years that you've used though on your net new construction average of 1.87, given that that would include the TID in, those
Yes.
were big construction years for us, right? They would represent some large construction years within the TID.
Yeah, the 1.87 was really an estimate of the TID out, so your TID in was a little bit higher, so. So how this all kind of flows through, and I mean, unfortunately, when we talk about levy limits, it's kind of hard to do so without running a bunch of numbers, so I'm gonna try to kind of speak to this at a high level, but this, what is shown up here on the screen is really a forecast of the town's maximum allowable levy, taking into account the levy limit worksheet that the town has to file annually with the Department of Revenue. So I'm just gonna kind of explain this conceptually without, focusing too much necessarily on all of the math here. So you start with your prior year's actual levy. So we'll use the most recent budget that was adopted as an example, your 2022 budget. So you start with the prior year's levy plus your personal property aid payment. Then the DOR, under the levy limit law, you have to subtract out the debt adjustment that you took the prior year. So that was $585,450. And then you can increase the levy by net new construction. So your net new construction percentage for the 2022 budget was 1.753%. So that allowed you to increase your levy by $45,816. So from there, then the town applied its other allowable adjustments. So you had your debt service levy, which is about $572,000. And then the town got the one-time increase from the electors of $197,000. So you arrived at your total levy of $3,423,000.67. So, that net new construction percentage, is kind of your limit, and doesn't necessarily, generate substantial amount of funds, on an annual basis. So you can see this past year, your allowable levy increase just due to net new construction was only, again, $45,860. That's it. And that's at 1.753%. So, using the debt adjustment, again, allows you to at least exclude your debt payments from levy limits. But, you had some changes in costs related to public safety this year, so you got the increase over the allowable levy of about $197,000. Broadly speaking, we're on year 16 of levy limits in Wisconsin, and, the impact of this statewide, varies. If communities have seen a lot of substantial growth, maybe they've been able to live within that net new construction percentage. But I would say over the past couple of years, there's a lot more communities that are starting to hit financial pressures under levy limits, because, that increase of, in this case, last year, $45,816, that's all you have to accommodate any changes in your budget from the prior year. And, if you have changes in, wages, or just changes in other service delivery, or you want to change your service delivery or provide more services, that's not a lot of buying power. And so communities are starting to find that they're having to find other ways to increase their allowable levy. As a town, with a population under 3,000, you have the advantage of going straight to the electors and asking them to approve that allowable increase, which you did this past year. Most other communities have to go through a much more elaborate process of doing a formal levy limit referendum, where there's a ballot question that has to get, put on the ballot and voted upon to increase their allowable levy. And we're seeing a lot more communities now having to consider that, because they've made cuts under their budgets over the years to stay under that allowable levy. And just over time, they're either cutting back on operational services, or they're making cuts in their capital investment, and they're starting to see the impacts of that over time. And so communities are looking for ways to address those deficiencies, and so more and more communities each year are looking at levy limit referendums. So this projects out your allowable levy over the next couple of years, kind of using that 1.87% for net new construction. This uses the town's existing debt profile. The town's debt service payments start dropping in fiscal year 2025, budget year 25, and then they drop substantially again in 2026. So if the town did need to issue debt for capital projects over some time, that would increase your allowable levy, but not compete with your net new construction amount, because again, debt service is exempted from levy limits. So in this analysis, you're seeing the allowable levy trend downward. That's largely because we're just using your existing debt profile. As the debt goes down, your allowable levy goes down, but your expenses are going down as well because your debt payments are reducing. So when you see that allowable levy starting to decrease, that's why. It's because of debt service payments. So we kind of included the levy change from prior years. So again, this is an estimate. So next year, just kind of based on your kind of current model, your levy change, your maximum levy could be about $56,000 higher than the prior year, about $53,000 the next year, and then after that, the allowable levy goes down because your existing debt payments go down. So that could change again if you finance some capital needs going forward. So this is kind of what I'll call kind of a status quo projection, just kind of looks at things if they stay comparable to where they've been the last couple of years.
You're being watched.
So on the next page, we ran the exact same scenario. The only difference is we used a higher net new construction percentage. So instead of 1.87%, we're using 2.13% and calculating what that same maximum allowable levy would be. So if we kind of want to just jump to kind of the conclusion here as far as the comparison between these two scenarios. So we factor in the net new construction increase as a result, using the Lido development as an example. The allowable levy by budget year 2026, without it would be about $3,321,000. With it, it would be about $3,352,000. So that's a difference of about $31,000 over that 5-year period. So while seeing some good net new construction growth outside of your TIF district and inside your TIF district helps your net new construction percentage, when you kind of go through the math of how that gets applied on the levy limit worksheet, we're not talking about, substantial dollars amount here. That doesn't mean that necessarily that growth is bad or shouldn't be encouraged, or responsible growth shouldn't be encouraged. It's just when you look at it from a levy limit perspective, that dollar amount change, even if you have some meaningful growth, over time it will build up, but it's not really moving the needle much, I would say, from a financial perspective. I mean, another $30,000 of levy capacity over a 4 to 5 year period is, in the grand scheme of things, isn't having a big impact on your budget. And I guess I'll say, with any projection, I'll kind of repeat this, this is an illustration. I mean, a lot can change this favorably or negatively in terms of what happens. I mean, we're trying to be very conservative with these projections, so hopefully things would turn out a little bit better. But we're trying to kind of be conservative with what we're projecting. So I want to pause and see if there's any other questions here, at least in terms of how the levy limit kind of calculation works and kind of how some of these growth projections are kind of impacting your allowable levy increase.
The Lido information, that involves the homes only, not the course itself?
Correct, as the homes only.
So that's not factored in. So any proposed buildings on the course and the course itself are not factored in?
So the home that's being constructed now would be essentially like a clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have to, there aren't plans at this time right now for like a separate clubhouse or restaurant that could come in the future for sure, but there isn't a separate plan for that at this moment.
But then the golf course itself isn't factored in, so we don't have a valuation on the golf course?
Yeah. I don't, Greg might know a number better than I do on essentially evaluation of the golf course and the land itself. I'm trying to think what we've used within the,
Once it's developed, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we were using when the TIF district was established, at least for kind of the two primary 18-hole golf courses, was about 8 to 9 million of incremental value. You know, when the numbers get assessed by the assessor and reported to the DOR, it's all kind of a lump sum number in terms of what gets reported to the state. But I know from conversations I've had with the town's assessor over the years, that was an approximate estimate of what we were using, at least for the courses within the TID district. The two 18-hole courses.
but would it be fair to say even if, so we're talking 8.5 million now with homes, even if you put another 8 million in there and doubled it, it would double net new construction.
Right. Greg, these Lido homes are gonna go in the rental pool, is that not correct?
They have the option to go into the rental pool, yes.
I thought they were going to go in the rental pool from what I understood.
I think I don't think that's a requirement.
Okay, but those that do, we would get room tax on that.
There would be room tax on, if they were rented.
So again, just to kind of summarize, I mean, kind of in terms of the fiscal impact, so using your most recent budget, you know, the net new construction increase was, you know, about $45,800. So, you know, if you see some growth, you know, in your net new construction, that's going to increase, but really kind of at a modest rate. Because, you know, we're at the 45,816. If you see net new construction go up to a little over 2%, you know, that allowable levy increase is a little over $60,000 per year. So it's kind of a gradual increase, but you know, it's certainly kind of providing more levy capacity for sure, but not substantially providing more levy authority to the town. I think the next item I wanted to address was really what happens when the TID closes under levy limits. So when a TIF district closes, a municipality receives a one-time allowable increase in its levy limit the year after the TID closes. And that's also a percentage that gets calculated. And so how that is calculated is that at the time of the TID closure, you take the incremental value of the TID district, all of the new taxable value that's been generated since the district was created, and you would divide that by the town's total equalized value excluding that tax increment at the time of closure. So whatever that percentage is, the levy limit law allows you to increase your allowable levy by 50% of that percentage. So let me use an example. So we projected out the levy limit closure, 10 years out from now. I'll be honest with you, projecting an impact of a TID closure on levy limits 10 years from now is kind of a bit of a fool's errand, but I can be a fool, so I did it. So how we kind of did it was we're projecting, with some additional growth in the TID district, the incremental value by 2030 is projected to be about 73.7 million. That's a projection. The town's equalized value projection that we projected, is about 1,067 million. So if you take the 73 million, divide by the 1,067 million, and cut that percentage in half, it's 3.45%. So that's the percentage that you can apply on the levy limit worksheet. So using an estimate 10 years from now, that allowable increase is about $115,600. So more meaningful than what we're projecting where the town has been from net new construction, but it's a one-time adjustment. So you can use it the year after TID closure. If you don't use it, then that adjustment doesn't show up on the levy limit worksheet in the following years. So to kind of put that number into context, when I was working on this with Jamie, I initially ran that same calculation that said, let's just for a hypothetical say if the TID had closed last year, And it would have been, you know, you would have had the benefit of that TID closure this year in 2022. And we used the current numbers available for the town's equalized value and the incremental value. That one-time levy limit increase for your 2022 budget would have been around $90,000 a year. So even with growth in the TID district between now and 2030, you know, that range doesn't change substantially. You know, we're at 90,000 now, you'd get to maybe 115,000 by year 2030. Again, that's, you know, I don't make many guarantees, but I will guarantee things will change over the next 10 years. So, you know, that's gonna change that, you know, percentage. But even looking at it in today's dollars and forecasting out several years going forward, you know, that's kind of the range that we're looking at. The other item, just to kind of, you know, put this into perspective again, is that, you know, we haven't forecasted any new debt within this 10-year levy limit forecast as well. The town's debt ends in 2030. So where that impacts is what your allowable levy could be higher, but it would just be offset by your increased debt payments. So when we're calculating at the bottom of these spreadsheets what the total levy would be and what the town's tax rate would be, that's assuming you issued no additional debt between now and 2030, which, you know, may not be reasonable between that period of time. But we just kind of took what we know with some forecasts for growth in the TID closure. So, you know, the bigger impact you see when the TID district closes is, you know, the impact on the overall tax rate. Because what happens when the TID district closes is all that incremental value returns to the tax rolls. So we're projecting by 2030, the incremental value of the TID district would be about 73.7 million. So all of that value would go onto the tax roll the year after the TID closes. So that's a nice increase in value, which then can, you know, impact your overall tax rate. So just, again, you know, looking at things, you know, over a 10-year period, you know, without the TID closure, what your maximum allowable levy would be, what it would be with the TID closure, again, that's about $150,000 additional capacity. You know, without the TID closure, the estimated tax rate would be $3.07 on an equalized basis. With the TID closure, the town portion of the tax rate would drop 10 cents. $185,000 home at that point in time, you know, the town share of the tax bill will go down $17. That's just the town's share. You know, other portions of the tax bill could be favorably impacted by the TID closure as well. So, you know, a lot of this comes more into focus the closer that TID district closure becomes reality. You know, a lot can change, you know, between now and 2030. There could be changes to the levy limit law favorably or unfavorably that could, you know, impact these numbers as well. But, you know, from a long-range financial planning standpoint, it's just something to be mindful of that, you know, planning for a TID closure should be done, you know, a few years in advance. You know, particularly the larger the TID district, the more increment value that's there, the bigger of a financial impact it's going to have on the town's budget. And so it's important to kind of, you know, be planning for that, or maybe potentially timing certain larger expenses if they're on the horizon to come in play with a TID closure. You know, I've other communities I've worked with that have had some larger TID closures that, you know, for example, a community that had a TID with about 222 million of value at the time it closed. It's a lot of value that comes onto the tax rolls at once. They had a large public works facility that they wanted to construct. They timed the financing of the public works building to the TID closure. So while they increased their allowable levy by a substantial amount because they took the TID closure adjustment, they took the debt adjustment, their levy went up about 29%, but their tax rate went down 23% because they timed all of it with the TID closure. So you know, that's the benefit of kind of doing this planning in advance to kind of you know, look at that impact.
Greg, do you have any idea what the rationale behind only being able to take 50% of the incremental increase?
Yeah, that's been in the levy limit law since it was created in '05. I think it was to really just kind of, I don't know the exact answer. I'll give you my opinion. I think my opinion is that it was put in place to assure that some of the incremental value that's coming onto the tax rolls is essentially going to, be assured to provide some tax relief, because you're capping how much the levy increase can be attributed to the incremental value coming online. That's my opinion. I mean, it's been in the levy limit law since the TID was created. There was one change though that made the percentage calculation more favorable. When the levy limit law was first introduced in 2005, you took the incremental value and the percentage was, you divide it by the community's total equalized value, which included the incremental value. So they changed it a couple of years after levy limits to go with the TID out, which bumped that percentage up. So they did make the percentage calculation a little more favorable, but it's always been that 50% cap.
Probably also limits the number of communities that wanna do it to. Doesn't make it quite as lucrative.
It doesn't make it quite as lucrative from a levy limit perspective, but I mean, you're still generating a lot of value that comes onto the tax rolls that can help, potentially reduce your tax rate, if all else being equal. Or you could potentially see a increase in your levy and still see the tax rate go down because you have that much value coming onto the tax rolls at once.
Our TID is also unique in the fact that we made the loan up front. Many TIFs are structured that you have to produce the increment before funds are provided.
And the towns TID was created under the town TID statutes, and under the town TID statutes, the maximum life of the TID district is 16 years. For city or village TID districts, the maximum life can be 20 or 27 years. So your TID by law is going to close quicker, just because it has a shorter life, but now the district is projected to close 2 years earlier than the maximum life. So, and we look at that each year when the new incremental values are determined by the DOR to kind of see how that changes, because the expenditure period for the TID district has ended, so there's not an opportunity to take on any new costs, so we're just waiting for the increment value to cover all the existing costs. So to just kind of end with kind of my summary, comments, as I mentioned early on, any development that you see, new construction that occurs within the TIF district or outside the TIF district, is going to benefit that net new construction percentage. So you receive that benefit from years past when construction occurred in the TIF district that helped, kind of drive up your net new construction percentage. When you're looking at growth in general, and you take into account, budget and levy limit constraints, it's important to kind of consider how growth impacts town services and impacts your budget. So as you have proposals for new development, whether it's within a TID or outside of a TIF district, are there going to be significant pressures put on existing town services as a result of that growth? As we've seen under, net new construction, your allowable levy increase per year is fairly modest. So, are you able to cover those costs of those additional services with that net new construction? Or can existing services levels handle the growth? If you can handle the growth of the existing staffing, existing investment to provide services, then you're going to see more benefit from that growth in terms of not incurring increased cost. And in terms of your allowable levy and what you can do from a budget perspective in each year, is going to be driven by a lot of variables. So your net new construction percentage, the amount of debt that you have outstanding, which you can increase your levy to cover debt, and then the TID closure when that happens. It's kind of a one-time opportunity for you to potentially increase your levy, but maybe also potentially see some reduction in your tax rate because of all the value that's coming online. So it's just something to know when that's going to occur, so you can be prepared to take advantage of it. So really the intent here was just to kind of try to put some of the growth projections into the context of levy limits and how that kind of impacts your levy capacity going forward. So Jamie, I don't know if you have something else you wanted to add, and I'm happy to take more questions.
I think just if we had questions, comments.
Thank you, that was pretty in-depth.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 10, discussion of possible action, approval of 60-month lease agreement and maintenance and service plan with E.O. Johnson for Rico C6000 copier.
There was a memo in the packet regarding this tonight. We would be slightly over budget, $600 if we did proceed with the purchase, but it's also a 60-month lease, so I wanted to make sure that we brought it forward because it would be a long-term lease that we would be entering into. I did include the specs for what we were looking at if you would be okay with proceeding.
Do we have other lease agreements in place with E.O. Johnson for equipment here?
We do, we have other copy machine lease agreements in other buildings. There aren't a lot of copy machine companies any
Right,
longer to
yeah.
get comparable quotes from.
Did we look at all about just buying the machine outright and getting a per copy charge for the ink and, or for the toner and that stuff, or?
We did, it was around $8,000 to purchase this copy machine outright. We just thought if we went over the 60 months, and since it was a lease, if something would occur, obviously this includes a maintenance agreement, but if by chance we would get one that needed
One.
extra work.
Yeah, you could overrun that quickly.
Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the 60-month lease agreement.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 11, discussion only. Notice of budgeted Rome water utility expense to accept quotation for SCADA system updates.
So there was also a memo in your packet tonight. Chad is here too if you had further questions. This is a discussion only because it was a budgeted expense, but it's over $10,000, so we wanted to report it to make sure that we were comfortable with the expense. I did hand out this evening an extra handout, one pager from B&N Technologies. It's for $11,155. This would add the filter system into the SCADA system. The filter is currently not part of the SCADA. The budget for this was $55,000 out of water utility, so we would still be within budgeted amount. Did I cover it all, Chad?
Yes,
When did we install the new SCADA system?
filter building was 2007, 4 was 2007, well, 3 was 2001, and the water tower was replaced already.
But the SCADA system itself, didn't we replace that? Was it a $20,000 expense somewhere a couple years
No, the
ago?
computer
Yes.
was 15,000.
So this is not the computer, this is
No,
more
this is all the electronics
okay,
in each building and antennas and
the
radios.
internals, okay.
You can see we did get 3 quotations since it was a expense over $10,000, and they do vary in cost. Any questions or concerns? Okay.
Alrighty. Number 12, discussion and possible action. Review of U.S. Treasury final rule on American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, final recovery funds.
I know Nick is dying to talk about
he's
this.
all, you all primed and,
So in your packets for this meeting, I think the administrator's memo was good in giving an overview of kind of what's happened since January. So in January, the Department of Treasury issued their final rule for ARPA funds. One correction on the memo, it does in fact take effect in April 1st of 2022. However, communities can utilize the new provisions right away. So you can operate actually in this interim period before April 1st of 2022. You can be operating under the interim or the final rule. In this case, as we'll kind of go through in our overview, the final rule greatly expanded on what you can use it for. And so it would be likely that anything we would be operating under would be using the final rules provisions anyway. So there were a couple
adjustments that were made in the final rule. And most significantly, and it's addressed in the memo here, was the loss of revenue category. So there's really 6 categories. Those categories didn't change. The categories are broad, and then they start to boil down as you look through the Treasury's rule. The 6 categories are supporting the public health response to COVID-19, replacing revenue loss, water and sewer infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, addressing the negative impacts of the pandemic, and that would be the economic impacts, and then the premium paid to essential workers. So there's really 6 categories. Always the big one, even when we had the interim rule, was that replacing revenue loss. The reason that's always been the big one is because where you have a loss of revenue, you can then use that amount. In the interim rule, it was that amount, and it was after a rather complex calculation. You could use that for what's termed general government services. It's very broad, and that would be the area that would allow things like infrastructure improvements to roads and that. And so it was always a really focused on area, and for good reason, because that would be an area that a lot of communities could then operate under to utilize those funds for a very broad range of activities. The final rule adjusted it from just a calculation, a complex calculation. Now there's a presumption in that final rule that every community has $10 million of loss. What that means is that up to $10 million of ARPA funds, and we're well below that, could be used for that revenue loss category. And so really what it means for our community is that all of your ARPA fund amount could technically fall now under that general government, which is that very broad category, okay? And so the purpose of today's meeting isn't necessarily to say, you know, these are the projects that are recommended, but more so to make you aware that now we can operate under that general government services, very broad category, in deciding how we use ARPA funds. Which means that as you generate ideas, it's going to be far more likely that your ideas will fall within allowable expenditures of the ARPA funds.
So we were never able to show a loss of revenue previously, right?
So correct. So under just to clarify, so those that are watching and you all understand, during the interim rule, there was a calculation that one had to go through to show a loss of revenue. We ran that calculation more than once and did not have a loss of revenue under that calculation. With the final rule, there is a calculation, but you don't have to do the calculation unless there would be a community that could show that received first more than 10 million and wanted to try to show that they lost more than 10 million. We don't have to go to that calculation. There's a presumption we've lost $10 million. Therefore, we can use all of our ARPA funds under that general government services category because of the loss of revenue presumption.
And we're talking about the first ARPA payment was like 177,000, something like that?
288 total.
288 total.
total.
The second disbursement will be June or July of this year, I believe, is what is being anticipated.
Thoughts?
We talked just briefly, this topic also came up at CDA prior to this, but talked briefly that maybe tonight we would want to even discuss slightly about how we wanted to come up with potential uses to look at an encompassing list. We want to share out with all of the town committees what would be potential needs or potential interest. Is that something that we just want to discuss here and invite people to join at a town board meeting and have that discussion?
My thought was, we look at the initial items we came up with, our priorities, and whittle those down, make sure we're covered there. That's my opinion.
Plus, we had talked about perhaps compensating some employees for their extra efforts
Yes.
during the pandemic.
That was a separate discussion. Yeah.
I'm good with starting there, whenever we're gonna start
With
that
the
conversation.
priorities, yep, putting
Okay.
together a list and bringing it back.
So then what we can do is work on, within those parameters, the priorities, we can work on then, something for you to have and then can work off of that to determine allocations and work down that list to start with.
I mean, it's extra, wasn't counted on, but we've got, issues we should take care of.
Any other questions? Otherwise, that will be, what we take, from this conversation will be, then the next step will be, you'll have a meeting notice, with an agenda item that, will then review that list and make determinations of, allocation amounts, for those priority areas.
We knew they were gonna change all that too, didn't we?
Oh, I mean, that was, pretty much the rule of thumb was during that interim period, just to hold on, because
Yeah.
there were.
Change is coming.
It tended to be expansions rather than restrictions, and it was always the push that there be a relaxation on some of that, general government services, allowance, I guess it would be.
Would have been nice if they would have changed that though before we did the revenue loss calculation for the 6th or 7th or 8th time.
Yeah.
All right. Number 13, discussion of possible action, approve request from the Heart of Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce to waive rental fees at the Rome Town Center gazebo for the Gather by the Gazebo Music Series, June 14th, July 12th, and August 9th, 2022, with possible rain dates of July 26th and August 30th, 2022.
I move that we waive the rental fees for Heart of Wisconsin on the dates of June 14th, July 12th, August 9th, and the rain dates of July 26th and August 30th.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Number 14, discussion and action, approval of appointment of Leslie Olson to the Leicester Public Library of Rome Board for the period of January 1st, 2022 through January 1st, 2025. Leslie's not here, right?
Move to approve the appointment of Leslie Olson to the Leicester Library Board.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, do we ever get any sort of background on these folks, or?
Yeah, that's my question. We're having the board vote on something they know nothing about.
So we, in the past, we can change. In the past, we haven't included their application in the meeting because the decision to appoint is brought from the chair and the board just confirms it. And the chair has met with the person and has made that selection. But they do all fill out an application, and I'm happy in the future, obviously, any personal information would be redacted, but to put that into the packet.
Can you cover Leslie's, do you have her general information on there, her background?
So Leslie is a retired elementary school teacher. She relocated here from Wapaka, has a home here now, but she was a chapter 1 reading teacher for 7 years before her retirement. So she's a really strong interest in literacy, and which was why she was put forth as the candidate.
And going forward, can we come up with a background so the board has something to look at?
We'll just include their application,
Yeah,
because that asks the
least.
questions of why they wanted to join the board.
Yeah, and perhaps if they want a separate interview, if they want to discuss anything with them, we will. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Welcome, Leslie. Hope you're watching. Number 15, the board may go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, subsection 1, subsection C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Chief of Police Employment Agreement. Can I get a
Make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Stat, Section 19.85, Sub 1, Sub C.
Second.
Can I get a roll call vote starting from my left?
Weissinger, yes.
Minter, yes.
Asdell, yes.
Goldman, yes.
Bowerhead, yes.
We are now in closed session.
We'll exit into the other room. Just a reminder, the mic and the camera stay live in this room. I got it. See you tomorrow.
Where's it going? Of course not.
To come out of closed session. As far as approving the agreement, I would approve the agreement, yes.
We got everybody here. Number 16. The board reserves the right to enter into open session authorized by Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 subsection 2 to possibly take action from the closed session and continue with the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve to come out of closed session, please?
I move we come out of closed session per Wisconsin State Section 19.85 sub 2.
Second.
Any discussion? Can I get a roll call vote starting from my left?
Weisinger, yes.
Minter, yes.
Asdell, yes.
Goldman, yes.
Bowerhead, yes.
We are out of closed session. Can I get a motion? Oh.
Motion to approve the contract with the chief of police as
As amended.
as amended.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Number 17, next agenda items.
So ARPA premium pay, we'll just tackle that specific one.
And our wish list.
We can
Yep.
start.
Yeah, we can definitely start that.
Snow plan commission items that'll go to the next meeting. I would have a question. I know the last two meetings, just because of the way that the month has fallen, we've done financials and department reports on the same agenda. Do we have strong feelings if the financials and the department reports were always on the second agenda? I only ask that because sometimes our first meeting is like on the first of the month. And it's hard to do financials
Sure.
when the end of the month is that close. Do we,
What about reports? Reason those can't be done within the first few days of the month?
well, the thought would be the same thing if it's
Police and
false.
fire reports would be hard to get everything
Yeah.
tabulated.
I just didn't know if we had concerns like that would be too much if we would just make the decision that those would both just fall to the second, knowing that when you meet the first Thursday of the month and that's the first, it's difficult to get a full month report. That also would help, like with Lifestar, they'll send it to us no later than the 7th day of the month. Oftentimes our first meeting is after the 7th, and then it'd fall into regular board reports on that second meeting.
I have no problem with that.
No,
That's fine.
Okay, okay. So then, moving forward, I think what we will do is just put financials and department reports on that second meeting. Okay.
Next meeting date and time?
February 17th, 5 p.m.
Can I get a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We're adjourned.